Do you ever think about those Christmas gifts, the ones that instantly marked which families were struggling? In the 1970s, certain presents carried unspoken messages about money, class, and survival every child understood without a word being said. What hidden shame was tucked beneath the tree? Hand-me-down clothing wrapped as gifts was one of those Christmas moments that could make a child's heart sink before the paper even hit the floor. In the 1970s, families passed down everything from winter coats to church shoes, and for many households, wrapping those hand-me-downs in fresh paper was the only way to put something under the tree at all. Kids recognized the fabric instantly. The same jacket their older sibling had worn 2 winters before, now folded neatly with a ribbon tied across it, like that changed anything. Parents tried so hard to make it feel special, smoothing the wrinkles, tucking in the tags, hoping the excitement of Christmas morning would distract from the obvious truth. But children are sharp, and they saw what their classmates received on Christmas morning, brand new coats still stiff with factory creases and tags dangling proudly. The contrast stung in ways nobody talked about, but everyone felt. What made it harder was that these gifts were given with love, genuine love from parents who had nothing else to give. And yet the world outside the front door judged those coats harshly, marking families in ways that stayed with children long after the holiday ended. Homemade coupons for chores or favors were the kind of gift that looked cheerful on the outside, but carried a heavy unspoken weight. In the 1970s, parents who could not afford store-bought presents often cut colored paper into squares, decorated them with crayons or markers, and wrote promises like "one free hug" or "help with dishes for a week" inside. Kids opened these envelopes on Christmas morning knowing immediately that the budget had run dry. It was not that the gesture lacked love, because it clearly came from a place of trying, but other children received toys, bicycles, and games while you received a handful of paper promises. Teachers sometimes asked what everyone got for Christmas, and explaining a coupon for extra bedtime minutes felt embarrassing in a way that stuck to your memory for years. Parents meant well, believing creativity could substitute for cost, but the world measured generosity in dollars back then just as harshly as it does now. These little coupons told a story of struggle that no child wanted to share, even if the parents who made them stayed up late carefully drawing each one with hands that had worked too hard all year. Fruit and nuts in Christmas stockings once carried a kind of old-fashioned charm, but by the 1970s, they had become quiet markers of which families could not afford anything else. Wealthier kids pulled chocolate bars, small toys, and shiny trinkets from their stockings, while poorer children reached in and found oranges, apples, and walnuts still in their shells. Parents tried to frame it as tradition, explaining that this was how their own grandparents celebrated the holidays, but kids knew the difference. An orange is not a bad thing, and cracking walnuts by the fire could even feel cozy, but when your classmates bragged about candy canes and miniature racing cars, fruit felt like a signal flare announcing your family's budget. The worst part was the smell. That sharp citrus scent clung to your hands all morning, mixing with the pine from the tree, permanently tying the aroma of oranges to feelings of not quite having enough. Even today, people who grew up in households that filled stockings with produce instead of presents sometimes flinch at the sight of a holiday fruit basket, remembering exactly what it meant to pull that first orange from the toe of a hanging sock. Generic store-brand toys instead of name brands were one of the cruelest ways the 1970s economy revealed which families had money and which ones did not. Parents tried their best, scanning discount store shelves for action figures, dolls, and games that looked close enough to the real thing, hoping children would not notice the difference. But children always noticed. The knockoff version of a famous doll had slightly different eyes, a face that looked just wrong enough to draw attention. The imitation action figure came in packaging that mimicked the original but spelled words differently, or used colors that did not quite match. Kids at school could spot a fake instantly, and the teasing that followed left marks that lasted far longer than any toy. What made it worse was understanding, even as a child, that your parents had tried. They walked those store aisles searching for something that might pass, something that could make Christmas morning feel normal just this once. Watching your mother's hopeful face as you unwrapped a toy everyone would mock made the whole moment sting twice as hard. Once for the gift itself, and once for the love you could not protect from the world's cruelty. Encyclopedia volumes as holiday presents became one of the more complicated markers of financial struggle in the 1970s. Parents who could not afford to buy an entire set at once would purchase single volumes each Christmas, stretching the collection across years of holidays and birthdays. Kids unwrapped Volume M or Volume S and tried to look grateful, knowing their wealthier classmates received entire sets delivered by salesmen in suits. The encyclopedias themselves were beautiful, leather-bound and heavy, filled with photographs and knowledge that mattered for schoolwork. But receiving one letter at a time told the world your family could only afford Christmas in installments. The incomplete set sat on the shelf like a public confession, missing chunks of the alphabet that everyone noticed. Some children grew up with encyclopedias that never reached Z, the final volumes lost to a year when money ran even shorter than usual. Parents believed they were investing in education, building something lasting, but kids often remembered the slow accumulation as a reminder of everything their family could not provide all at once, even when they wanted to. Handmade sweaters knitted by relatives carried love in every stitch, but in the 1970s they also carried an unmistakable message about where your family stood. Grandmothers, aunts, and mothers spent weeks working yarn into patterns, creating garments meant to keep children warm and show how much they cared. The problem was that other kids wore store-bought sweaters with brand names stitched into the collars, clean lines, and fashionable colors that matched catalog pages. A hand-knitted sweater, no matter how carefully made, had lumps where stitches bunched, colors that never matched the store displays, and a homemade look that announced itself across any classroom. Kids wore them because they had no choice, tugging at sleeves that stretched unevenly or itched against sensitive skin. Teachers sometimes praised the craftsmanship, trying to ease the sting, but that only drew more attention to something most children wanted to hide. What made it worse was the guilt of wishing your grandmother had just bought something normal, knowing she could not afford to, and had given everything she had through those needles and yarn. Practical items like underwear and socks became the gifts no child wanted to unwrap on Christmas morning, especially in the 1970s, when appearances mattered fiercely. Opening a package to find a 3-pack of white briefs or a bundle of brown socks sent a message that echoed far beyond the living room. It meant your family's budget could not stretch past necessities, that even holidays had to serve a practical purpose instead of a joyful one. Parents often tried to soften the blow by wrapping these items alongside something small, a candy bar or a tiny trinket, but the socks and underwear took center stage no matter how the gift was arranged. Kids dreaded the inevitable question at school about what they received, knowing there was no good answer. Nobody bragged about getting a pack of underwear, yet that was exactly what sat under so many trees in homes where money had run short. What stung most was knowing your parents had to make that choice, buying socks instead of toys because the socks were needed and there simply was not enough left over for both. Necessity swallowed joy, leaving only the memory of pretending gratitude while wishing for something more. Regifted items still showing previous tags were one of the most painful reminders that Christmas did not land equally on every family. In the 1970s, money stretched thin for millions of households, and parents sometimes resorted to rewrapping gifts received from neighbors or workplace exchanges and placing them under the tree for their own children. The problem was that regifts often carried evidence: a price tag from a store in another city, a card tucked inside that read, "To Barbara," even though no one in the family had that name. Wrapping paper creased in ways that showed it had been opened before. Children noticed these details faster than adults expected, piecing together the truth while pretending not to see it. The sting came not from ingratitude but from understanding exactly what it meant. Your parents had nothing new to give, so they gave what they could find, hoping Christmas magic might distract you from reality. It rarely did. Those regifted toys and books became artifacts of struggle, objects that carried someone else's name and someone else's holiday before they landed in your hands, always second, always recycled, always marked by fingerprints from a life you never knew. Toys assembled from garage sale parts told a story of ingenuity wrapped tightly around desperation. In the 1970s, parents who could not afford new toys often hunted through weekend garage sales, picking up broken or incomplete items and bringing them home to repair, repaint, or combine. A doll missing an arm might gain one from another doll found across town. A toy truck without wheels might roll again thanks to parts scavenged from a forgotten box in someone's basement. These Frankenstein creations were given with hope, wrapped in bright paper, and placed under the tree beside store-bought gifts from wealthier relatives. Children could tell immediately. The paint did not match, the parts sat slightly crooked, or something moved in a way the original toy never would have. The moment of unwrapping became a moment of silent understanding. Your parents had tried, had worked with their hands, had searched for anything that might bring you joy, and all they could offer was something pieced together from other families' discards. That love was real and undeniable, but so was the shame of knowing that the world outside would judge the toy and the family who gave it. Single-board games shared among all siblings became one of the quieter markers of a family stretched too thin in the 1970s. Wealthier children received their own games, their own toys, their own carefully wrapped stacks of presents to unwrap one by one. Poorer families often pooled resources into one communal gift, a single board game placed under the tree with all the children's names scrawled across the tag. Kids understood what that meant before they even lifted the lid. There was no present for just you, nothing that belonged only to your hands, nothing private or personal about Christmas morning. The game might have been wonderful, a colorful box full of cards, spinners, and tiny plastic pieces meant to bring family together, but it was not yours. It was everyone's, and that meant it was also no one's. Fights broke out over who controlled the pieces, who got to roll first, and who had to share more than the others. Parents hoped the game would unite the family, but children often remembered the message hiding beneath the fun. Christmas was split into fractions, and no matter how hard your parents tried, there was not enough to go around. Coloring books and crayons as main gifts carried an air of disappointment that hung over Christmas morning like fog. In the 1970s, these items cost almost nothing and sat on store shelves as last-minute options for families who had exhausted every possibility. Kids loved coloring, of course, but receiving a coloring book as your primary present while classmates unwrapped bicycles and electric race car sets created a gap impossible to ignore. The coloring book itself was thin, the pages flimsy, and the crayons came in boxes of 8 instead of the grand 64 packs wealthier children bragged about. Parents wrapped them carefully, sometimes adding a ribbon to make the package look fuller, but the weight gave it away before the paper even tore. Children learned to smile and say thank you while their stomachs sank, rehearsing the lies they would tell at school. The cruelest part was how quickly a coloring book was finished, how soon the pages filled and the crayons wore down, leaving nothing but a reminder of how little there had been to begin with. These gifts taught children that Christmas was not fair, that some families had less to give no matter how much love filled the room. Homemade toys carved or built by fathers carried a strange duality that children in the 1970s struggled to understand. On one hand, the effort was obvious. A wooden car sanded smooth, a dollhouse assembled from scrap lumber, a toy chest painted in bright colors by hands that usually spent their days doing harder labor. These gifts took hours, sometimes weeks, and represented sacrifices of time that money could never buy. But children did not see sacrifice when they tore off the wrapping paper. They saw something homemade, something that did not come from a store, something that would never appear in a commercial or a catalog. The other kids had toys that lit up, made sounds, and came in boxes covered with pictures of smiling children. Yours came wrapped in newspaper because your father ran out of gift wrap and hoped you would not notice. The love was real, the craftsmanship often impressive. But the world outside measured gifts by price tags and brand names, not by the calluses on a father's hands. Children carried that conflict for years, grateful and ashamed in equal measure, never quite sure which feeling was supposed to win. Clothing from thrift stores rewrapped as new was one of the most carefully guarded secrets of struggling families in the 1970s. Parents would spend hours sorting through racks of secondhand dresses, shirts, and pants, searching for items clean enough and stylish enough to pass as store-bought. They washed them twice, ironed out every wrinkle, and removed any tags that might reveal the truth. On Christmas morning, these clothes appeared under the tree looking almost new, folded neatly in boxes or wrapped in tissue paper meant to suggest department store origins. But children often recognized the subtle signs. A hem that had been let out, a button replaced with one that did not quite match, a faint smell of another family's detergent that lingered despite every effort. The discovery was never spoken aloud, but it changed the way kids looked at their parents, understanding for the first time how hard they worked to disguise what they could not afford. That silence became its own kind of gift, a shared agreement to pretend together and protect each other from a truth that hurt too much to say out loud. Dollar store stocking stuffers instead of name-brand candy marked Christmas morning with a particular kind of quiet disappointment. In the 1970s, wealthier children pulled brand-name chocolate bars, wrapped caramels, and fancy ribbon candy from their stockings, while poorer kids found off-brand hard candies, generic lollipops, and treats in wrappers no one recognized. The difference was obvious the moment you compared stockings with a friend or cousin. Their candy came in shiny foil with logos everyone knew from television commercials. Yours came in plain cellophane, tasting vaguely chemical and dissolving too quickly on the tongue. Parents filled those stockings late at night, believing children would not notice or would not care, but kids always noticed. They learned to eat their candy alone, hiding the wrappers before anyone could see where the sweets really came from. The shame was not about the candy itself, but about what it revealed, that even something as small as a stocking stuffer had to be stretched, substituted, and quietly apologized for in homes where every penny mattered more than pride. Gifts wrapped in newspaper instead of proper wrapping paper told a story before the present inside was ever revealed. In the 1970s, wrapping paper cost money that many families simply did not have, especially after scraping together enough to buy even modest gifts. Parents would save newspaper sections, smoothing out the pages and folding them carefully around boxes, sometimes adding a hand-tied bow made from kitchen string or fabric scraps. Children noticed immediately. The comics section was the best option, at least offering color and pictures, but even that looked nothing like the glossy, patterned paper their classmates described. Some kids tried to unwrap their gifts slowly, hoping to hide the newspaper beneath their bodies before anyone saw. Others ripped fast, crumpling the evidence into balls and shoving it behind the couch. The gift inside might have been wonderful, but the wrapping had already announced something the child did not want the world to know. It was a small humiliation, easily dismissed by adults who called it practical or environmentally friendly. But for children, it was one more way the holidays reminded them exactly where their family stood. Clearance toys from the previous Christmas season arrived under the tree carrying visible marks of their discounted origins. In the 1970s, parents who could not afford current prices waited for post-holiday sales, buying toys at deep discounts and storing them for the following year. The problem was that children recognized last year's toys instantly. The packaging showed characters from cartoons that had already ended. The designs looked outdated compared to what commercials now advertised. Sometimes the boxes showed wear from sitting on clearance shelves for months, corners dented and cellophane yellowed. Kids unwrapped these gifts knowing they were receiving yesterday's excitement at today's celebration, a reminder that their family's budget operated on a different timeline than everyone else's. Parents hoped children would not notice or would not care, but the playground conversations after winter break always revealed the truth. Everyone knew which toys were new and which had been pulled from last year's leftovers. The savings mattered enormously to struggling families, but the social cost landed squarely on the children who had to explain why their gifts looked so familiar. Homemade candy and baked goods as primary presents carried sweetness and sadness in equal measure. In the 1970s, Mothers and grandmothers who could not afford store-bought gifts spent hours in the kitchen making fudge, cookies, brittle, and divinity, wrapping each piece carefully in wax paper and arranging them in tins or boxes decorated with hand-drawn holiday scenes. The treats themselves were often delicious, made from recipes passed down through generations and perfected over decades of practice. But children who received homemade candy while their friends unwrapped toys understood the difference immediately. You cannot play with fudge. You cannot show off cookies the way you show off a new doll or action figure. The candy disappeared within days, eaten and forgotten, leaving nothing to prove that Christmas had happened at all. Parents poured genuine love into every batch, staying up late to get the texture just right. But kids measured gifts by what lasted, what could be displayed, what made other children jealous. Homemade treats failed every one of those tests, no matter how perfectly the chocolate had been tempered or how beautifully the tin had been painted. Receiving only one small gift when siblings got more created wounds that never fully healed. In the 1970s, parents sometimes had to make impossible choices, stretching a limited budget across multiple children while knowing the math would never work out fairly. The oldest might receive something practical because they understood the situation. The youngest might get the only real toy because they were too young to hide their disappointment. Middle children often fell through the cracks entirely, receiving token gifts meant to fill space under the tree rather than bring genuine joy. Kids counted presents obsessively, comparing stacks and measuring love by the number of packages bearing their name. When the count came up short, explanations about fairness or practicality meant nothing. All a child saw was evidence that they mattered less, that their Christmas was somehow worth fewer dollars than their brothers or sisters. Parents agonized over these decisions late at night, trying to balance need against want against what little remained in the checking account. But children only saw the results, and the results told a story that lingered long after the tree came down. Toys from church charity drives carried an unmistakable air of second-hand origins that children recognized instantly. In the 1970s, many families relied on community programs, church collections, and charitable organizations to provide Christmas gifts they could not otherwise afford. These toys arrived in boxes or bags, often previously owned, cleaned up, and redistributed to families in need. The gesture was generous and the intent was pure, but children knew the difference between a gift chosen specifically for them and one pulled from a donation bin. The toys often showed signs of prior ownership, a scratch here, a missing piece there, a faded spot where another child's hands had worn the paint away. Kids accepted these gifts with practiced smiles, grateful in a complicated way that mixed appreciation with embarrassment. They learned not to ask where presents came from, and not to complain about imperfections that revealed too much. The charity itself was beautiful, but receiving it reminded children every Christmas that their family needed help, that they belonged to a category of need that others could see and measure and quietly judge. Gifts clearly purchased at gas stations or convenience stores announced last-minute desperation louder than any words. In the 1970s, these small roadside shops stocked a limited selection of cheap toys, novelty items, and random merchandise meant for impulse buyers rather than serious gift givers. Parents who ran out of money or time sometimes grabbed whatever sat on those shelves, wrapping plastic combs, keychains, tiny puzzles, or off-brand stuffed animals that smelled faintly of motor oil and cigarette smoke. Children recognized these gifts immediately, having passed the same spinning racks 100 times while their parents paid for fuel. The packaging was always wrong, too small or too flimsy, the kind of thing meant to hang on a peg rather than sit under a tree. Kids understood what these presents meant without anyone saying a word. Dad had forgotten, or the money had run out, or something had gone wrong in ways no one wanted to explain. The gift itself hardly mattered because the message behind it was so much louder, a confession of failure wrapped in cellophane and handed over with desperate hope that love might somehow cover what money could not. Handmade dolls or stuffed animals sewn from fabric scraps carried a particular kind of heartbreak that only children who received them understood. In the 1970s, mothers who could not afford store-bought toys stayed up late, cutting old clothing into pieces, stitching button eyes onto faces made from pillowcase fabric, and stuffing bodies with whatever soft material they could find. These creations were given with pride and love, wrapped carefully and placed under the tree as if they were treasures. But children saw what other kids brought to school after the holidays: plastic dolls with perfect hair, stuffed animals with factory stitching, toys that looked exactly like the ones in commercials. The homemade version had crooked seams, mismatched buttons, and a face that never quite looked right, no matter how hard a mother tried. Kids carried these toys anyway, sometimes out of guilt, sometimes out of real affection, but always aware that the world measured worth by store tags. The love sewn into every stitch was real, but so was the quiet shame of owning something no catalog ever pictured and no friend ever envied. Books from library sales with stamps still inside arrived under Christmas trees, carrying visible proof of their institutional past. In the 1970s, public libraries regularly sold old or duplicate volumes for pennies, and parents who could not afford bookstores often filled bags with discarded titles. These books were wrapped and given as gifts, their pages yellowed, their spines cracked, and their covers stamped with dates and library codes that no amount of erasing could fully remove. Children opened them on Christmas morning and saw immediately where they had come from: the checkout cards still tucked into pockets, the faded stamps marking property of a branch across town, the smell of old paper mixed with decades of other readers' hands. Parents hoped kids would focus on the stories inside rather than the origins outside, but children understood the difference between a book bought new and one rescued from a discard pile. The reading itself was no less valuable, but the gift carried a weight that lingered, a reminder that even something as simple as a book had to be salvaged rather than chosen fresh from a shelf. Plastic jewelry from vending machines masqueraded as real presents under Christmas trees in homes where every quarter mattered. In the 1970s, parents sometimes walked past department store jewelry counters knowing they could never afford what sat inside, then stopped at grocery store lobbies where gumball machines dispensed tiny rings, bracelets, and necklaces for spare change. These trinkets were wrapped in tissue paper and placed in small boxes meant to suggest something finer, given to daughters who asked for something shiny without understanding what that request cost. Children recognized the cheap plastic immediately: the way the colors looked too bright, the way the metal turned fingers green, the way the stones wobbled loosely in their settings. They wore them anyway, sometimes proudly, sometimes with quiet resignation, knowing this was all their family could give. The gesture was sweet, the intention pure, but the vending machine origins were impossible to hide. Friends noticed, cousins compared, and the little plastic ring became one more reminder that Christmas arrived differently depending on which house you lived in. Gifts bought on layaway that arrived late carried an apology baked into their very existence. In the 1970s, layaway programs allowed struggling families to pay for presents in installments over weeks or months, but sometimes the math did not work out in time for Christmas morning. Parents who fell behind on payments watched December 25th arrive with nothing to show for their effort, forced to explain why the tree looked emptier than expected. Children woke up to promises instead of packages, told that something wonderful was coming but was not ready yet. The wait stretched into January, sometimes February, with anticipation slowly souring into disappointment. When the gift finally arrived, it carried a strange energy. No longer a Christmas present, but a reminder of what had gone wrong. Kids unwrapped it weeks after their classmates had forgotten the holidays entirely, holding something meant for a morning long since past. The toy or clothing was exactly what they wanted, but the timing told a story no child wanted to repeat, a story of installments, of waiting, of love that could not quite keep pace with the calendar. IOUs for gifts that never came represented the most painful form of Christmas disappointment, a promise written on paper that slowly dissolved into nothing. In the 1970s, parents who had run out of options sometimes wrote notes explaining that a present was coming soon, just not today. These slips of paper were folded into envelopes, placed under the tree, and opened by children who tried to believe that next week or next month would bring what Christmas morning could not. But life has a way of swallowing good intentions. Bills arrived. Emergencies happened. The money that was supposed to appear never materialized, and the IOU sat in a drawer gathering dust until everyone agreed to stop mentioning it. Children learned not to ask, sensing that the question caused pain their parents could not bear. The gift that was promised became a ghost, hovering over future holidays as a reminder that sometimes love is not enough, that wanting to give and being able to give are two entirely different things. Those IOUs taught children lessons about hope and disappointment that stayed with them far longer than any toy ever could. Pez dispensers started as simple candy toys, but by the 1980s they had morphed into full-blown collectibles. Kids loved flipping the heads back to reveal the tiny pastel candies, but adults began hoarding them too, chasing after rare designs and turning a goofy toy into serious business. Characters range from superheroes to cartoon icons, each one with its own clunky plastic head. Kids compared dispensers at recess, traded them like baseball cards, and stuffed pockets full of chalky candy that never tasted as good as it looked. The dispensers broke easily, and the candy often turned into sticky powder, but the fun was in the ritual. Flipping open Mickey Mouse's head for a sugar fix felt like magic, even when the candy disappointed. Today, Pez collectors still pay big money for rare designs, but for kids in the 1980s, they were cheap fun. Do you remember carrying one in your pocket, showing it off long after the candy was gone? The video disc player, specifically RCA's capacitance electronic disc, or CED for short, except we are not using abbreviations here, so let us just call it what it was. A huge plastic record that you shoved into a machine in hopes of watching a movie. It looked like vinyl, but it definitely was not groovy. You needed a special player, the discs were fragile, and rewinding? Not happening. It was like asking your television to do a ballet recital while wearing hiking boots. It launched in the early 1980s and flopped so hard that even RCA, the company behind it, backed out just a few years later. People already had VHS tapes. They had beta tapes. Nobody asked for a third format that looked like a frisbee and handled like a toddler on a sugar rush. Sure, the packaging was cool, but it was a disaster in living rooms. It took up space and made too much noise, and not the good kind. This thing had all the flash and none of the function. But if you thought that was loud, wait until you see what came down the slopes wearing a highlighter. Scratch and sniff stickers made notebooks smell like fruit salad, or something pretending to be. Grape, banana, pizza, popcorn, if it existed, there was probably a sticker that gave off a chemical approximation of it. These tiny scented rewards were currency on the playground. You earned them from teachers, you traded them with friends, you collected them in sticker books and flipped through your favorites like a sommelier of glue and artificial scent. Some smelled better than others. Some were so strong they made your eyes water. Others lost their smell after a few scratches but were kept anyway, honored like faded trophies. You knew the popular ones: root beer, bubble gum, and anything with glitter. You also knew the duds, like liverwurst or mystery meat, that somehow ended up in your binder anyway. Scratching a sticker in class was a quiet act of rebellion. You were not supposed to, but you did. And then you passed the notebook around so others could sniff and nod in approval, or gag in horror. Scratch and sniff stickers were low-tech fun with high nostalgic value. They turned paper into treasure. And even today, one whiff of fake strawberry is enough to transport you straight back to third grade with a smile. G.I. Joe changed everything the moment he marched onto toy shelves in 1964. Marketed not as a doll, but as an action figure, he offered boys the same kind of character-driven play that girls had with Barbie, but with a combat boot twist. The original 12-inch figure came with a military uniform, dog tags, and enough flexibility to strike a pose or take a fall. Kids could swap out his gear, helmets, rifles, backpacks, even scuba suits, and send him off on missions across the living room or backyard battlefield. It was the height of the Cold War, and Joe reflected that tension, but filtered through a child's sense of adventure. Over time, he evolved into a whole universe of characters, vehicles, and storylines. But those first editions were pure, iconic, and endlessly played with. G.I. Joe was a soldier, a sailor, an adventurer. He climbed trees, dove into mud puddles, and slept in shoebox barracks. For many boys growing up in the 1960s, he was the first toy that truly felt like theirs. He was more than plastic. He was valor, imagination, and action rolled into one heroic pose. And every kid who owned one remembers how it felt to gear him up for battle. It started innocently. Someone pulled the Christmas lights out of the attic. One box, then another, then a tangled nightmare of green cords, burnt-out bulbs, and sheer electrical chaos. Those old C9 lights were not delicate. They were weapons. Heavy glass bulbs that could heat a room or start a small fire if you left them on too long. And they were always tangled. You sat on the floor for what felt like hours, picking at knots that seemed to multiply. One strand wrapped around another. A bulb fell out. Someone stepped on it. You found a squirrel's nest in there once. Don't ask. And the whole time, your dad stood over you saying, "Just pull it gently," which helped exactly 0%. Every year, someone said, "We should wrap these better when we put them away." Every year, no one did. You tested each bulb by unscrewing it and plugging the strand in to see which one was dead. Sometimes it was 3. Sometimes it was 12. Sometimes the whole strand just gave up on life. But when they finally worked, when you plugged them in and the whole tree lit up in fat, glowing colors, that was Christmas. Those lights were not subtle. They were hot, bright, and proud. They made the whole room feel like something important was about to happen, and they stayed tangled in the box until next year. In the 1980s, garbage Pail Kids cards became the ultimate rebellion in pocket-sized form. They were grotesque, hilarious, and irresistible, parodying the sweet-faced Cabbage Patch craze with oozing, puking, and exploding cartoon children. The artwork was so disgusting it became funny, and kids could not get enough. Trading them at school was a black market operation. You slipped cards across desks, swapped them under lunch tables, and bragged about pulling the rarest or grossest one in a fresh pack. Teachers hated them, parents were horrified, and principals banned them outright, which only made kids want them more. The cards were sticky, cheap, and often left gum residue on your fingers, but they were gold to collectors. Friendships were built or broken on whether you had a good pull, and recess often looked like a trading floor of giggling kids showing off vomit-themed art. Looking back, it is absurd that such revolting images were once prized possessions. But in the 1980s, the grosser the card, the greater the glory. Do you remember hiding your Garbage Pail Kids collection from your parents, certain they would throw it out if they found it? In the 1980s, the dream of the future had a name: home robots. And none promised more, or delivered less, than toys like Omnibot. He was supposed to be your personal assistant. He had flashing eyes, a tray, a remote control, and a tape deck built into his chest. He looked like a cross between a blender and a traffic cone, but with a smile. The commercials were wild. They showed him serving drinks, waking kids up for school, even guarding the front door. In reality, he rolled about 1 foot per minute, beeped at unpredictable intervals, and dropped whatever you placed on his tray. If you were lucky, he made it across the living room before getting stuck on a carpet. But we loved him anyway. Because for a hot second, we believed the future was now. Even if the future ran on D batteries and got confused by floor lamps. Still, nothing summed up 1980s optimism like putting faith in a glorified plastic scooter. And if you thought that was useless, wait until we talk about a trend that was loud, crunchy in all the wrong ways. Your entire torso in a neon windbreaker, coming up next. DIY haircuts were a gamble most families took at least once, and usually regretted. With no YouTube tutorials or professional scissors, someone at home decided they could just trim it a little. What followed was part haircut, part identity crisis. A kitchen chair became the salon throne. A towel around your shoulders caught the clippings. And your tears. Bangs were the first to go, hacked straight across like a lawnmower had passed through. One side was always shorter. The back was ignored. And when it was finally done, you stared into the mirror wondering who let this happen. Sometimes it was mom. Sometimes it was your older sister. Once in a while, you tried doing it yourself, armed with safety scissors and too much confidence. School the next day felt like a walk of shame. Hats became your best friend. Friends pretended not to notice. But deep down, they knew, and they remembered. Everyone has at least one photo of a haircut gone wrong, crooked, uneven, or alarmingly short. It was a rite of passage, a test of patience, a bold act of trust. DIY haircuts were terrifying, hilarious, and unforgettable. And somehow, some way, the hair always grew back. Milk delivery boxes were part of the morning routine before grocery stores became the center of every neighborhood. In the 1960s, many American homes had a small metal box sitting just outside the front door or tucked near the back steps. Inside, the milkman would leave fresh glass bottles filled with whole milk, sometimes with cream floating at the top. It was a system built on trust and timing. Families left their empty bottles out at night, and by morning new ones would appear, cold and ready for breakfast. The box was often insulated to keep the milk cool, and in the winter the tops might freeze and push the cardboard caps up like little crowns. Kids raced to bring it in before it could spoil in the sun. Some deliveries even included extras: eggs, butter, cottage cheese, depending on the service. The clink of bottles in the early morning was a familiar sound, and the sight of the milkman pulling up in a white truck or on a three-wheeled cart was part of the rhythm of daily life. It was personal, reliable, and felt like a small luxury. Today, the boxes are mostly gone, rusting behind old homes or used as planters, but to those who remember, they represent a time when things felt simpler, more local, and a little more dependable, one delivery at a time. There was no streaming, no on-demand, no watch it whenever you want. In the 1980s, if a Christmas special aired, you watched it, or you waited another whole year. That was the deal. And it made every special feel like an event. You checked the TV guide, you circled the date, you told your friends at school what night it was on. Rudolph, Frosty, The Grinch, Charlie Brown. They each had their night, and you planned your life around it. Homework got done early. Dinner got eaten fast. You sat in front of the TV with your feet tucked under you, waiting for that opening music like it was the national anthem. And if someone changed the channel during a commercial, war. There was no pausing, no rewinding. If you missed the part where the Grinch's heart grew 3 sizes, you just missed it. You had to imagine it based on what your friend told you at recess. Some families taped them on VHS, but that required planning, a blank tape, and someone who knew how to set the timer. Most of the time, you just showed up live and hoped for the best. The commercials were part of the magic. Toy ads that made everything look 10 times cooler than it actually was. You memorized jingles. You whispered, "I want that," 12 times per break. These specials were appointment television, and somehow that made them sacred. Today, streaming lets kids watch anytime, but nothing matches the magic of Saturday mornings. Do you remember rushing to the kitchen, cereal box in hand, afraid you'd miss the opening theme of your favorite show? In the 1980s, nothing caused more schoolyard envy than the Trapper Keeper. These colorful binders with Velcro flaps and sliding pockets turned organization into a fashion statement. Kids compared designs like car enthusiasts comparing engines, rainbows, geometric patterns, cartoon characters, all screaming personality. Opening a Trapper Keeper was theater. The loud rip of Velcro, the click of rings, the sliding of pockets, it was school supply as performance art. Friends huddled around, checking out the newest designs, while jealous classmates plotted to convince their parents to buy one too. Of course, the wars came quickly. Whose Trapper Keeper was cooler? Who had the newest release? Who could slam theirs shut the loudest? The debates raged like courtroom battles, with kids defending their binders as if they were prized possessions. Teachers rolled their eyes, annoyed at the distraction. But for kids, the Trapper Keeper was more than paper and plastic. It was identity. Losing one felt like a tragedy. Gaining one felt like victory. Today, they survive as nostalgia bait. But in the 1980s, Trapper Keepers ruled schools. Do you remember slamming yours shut, grinning as the Velcro echoed through the classroom? Before the internet, your childhood thrills came from simpler things, like scratch and sniff stickers. These were absolute gold in classrooms, sticker books, and birthday goodie bags. The premise was simple: scratch the surface, take a sniff, and enjoy the tiny burst of scent. Some were awesome: grape soda, bubblegum, peppermint. Others, not so much: wet dog, old cheese, burnt rubber. Why were those even options? But that was part of the fun. You never knew what you were getting. They popped up in storybooks, posters, notebooks, even dolls. Some smelled like your favorite snack. Others smelled like a science experiment gone wrong. The real issue? Over time, most of them turned. That once glorious banana scent started to reek like mildew. Your cherished pizza-scented sticker morphed into something that smelled like a shoe left in the sun. Still, these things were addictive. Collecting them was a competition. Trading them was an art. And proudly sticking one on your folder felt like decorating a trophy case. But if scent was the frontier, the next fad tried to leap into the future altogether. It promised technology, automation, and companionship. What it delivered was a robot that rolled in circles and maybe beeped once. Television antenna adjustments were part of the evening routine, just like brushing your teeth or fighting over the remote. Before streaming, before digital signals, there were rabbit ears, two shiny rods that stood on top of the television like alien feelers. Getting a clear picture meant twisting them in random directions, adjusting one while the other stayed stubbornly out of reach. Sometimes you needed to stand on one foot. Sometimes the only way to get the signal was to hold the antenna yourself and stay there, frozen, arm extended, human satellite. Someone from the couch would yell, "Right there! Do not move," and you would stay stuck in position, sacrificing comfort for clarity. Foil was added for better reception. Coat hangers became tools of innovation. And if the weather was bad, good luck. The static would return like an uninvited guest. It was frustrating, yes, but it was also communal. Families worked together to solve the mystery of the fuzzy screen. You cheered when the picture came in. You groaned when it disappeared mid-show. Antenna adjustments were the dance of analog television. Awkward, unpredictable, and always a little magical when they actually worked. Chatty Cathy was more than just a doll. She was the voice of a generation. Introduced by Mattel in 1960, she was one of the first mass-produced talking dolls, and for many little girls, she felt like a real friend. With her round face, blonde bob haircut, and soft vinyl limbs, she looked sweet enough. But the real magic happened when you pulled the cord on her back. Suddenly, Cathy could speak, saying phrases like, "Let's play school," or "I love you." She became a sensation almost overnight. Children were enchanted by her ability to talk back, even if her voice was tinny and slightly robotic. For parents, she was a marvel of engineering. For kids, she was a companion who never interrupted and always agreed. Cathy sparked a whole line of talking dolls and helped kick off a new wave of interactive toys. And although later toys would be flashier, louder, and more advanced, none carried the same simple wonder. For many, the sound of that pull string and the soft mechanical voice is a vivid echo of childhood. Chatty Cathy is often remembered not just for what she said, but for what it felt like to hear her talk for the first time. Some families had a rotating tree stand, not just any stand, a motorized musical one that slowly spun the tree while playing a tinny version of O Tannenbaum on a loop. It sounded like a music box that had seen better days. It creaked, it wobbled, it played the same 12 notes over and over until someone in the house quietly lost their mind. But it looked amazing. The tree would turn slowly, catching the light from every angle. Ornaments sparkled. Tinsel shimmered. You sat there mesmerized, watching the same side come around again and again, like a very slow, very festive carousel. And the song? You did not even hear it anymore after the first 100 plays. It just became the background hum of Christmas. The motor was not strong. If you overloaded one side of the tree with ornaments, it would stop mid-spin and groan like it was giving up. You had to redistribute the weight like you were balancing a science project. Sometimes the music slowed down when the batteries got weak, turning the cheerful tune into something that sounded vaguely haunted. You changed the batteries. You kept it spinning. Because a spinning tree was fancy. It meant your family had arrived. And even now, if you hear that tune, you are right back in the living room, watching the lights go round and round. Before streaming, before DVDs, there was the weekend pilgrimage to the video rental store. Families wandered the aisles, staring at colorful VHS boxes, debating for what felt like hours over which movie would earn the one-night slot. Finally, a tape was chosen, carried home in a bulky plastic case, ready for popcorn and living room magic. The catch came the next day, returning it. If you forgot to rewind, the store clerk would sigh, roll their eyes, or even charge a rewind fee, parents muttered in embarrassment, while kids pretended not to notice. Be kind, rewind became less a slogan and more a commandment of 1980s life. The tape itself was clunky, with fuzzy tracking lines and the occasional stretch of muffled sound. Still, it felt like luxury to watch a movie on demand, even if demand meant you had to bike back the next morning to drop it off. The real stress? Hoping the movie you wanted had not already been rented out. Popular titles had long waiting lists, and kids would beg clerks to check the return bin just in case. A victory meant sprinting home with a smile and rewinding carefully to avoid disaster. Looking back, the whole system feels hilariously outdated, but for families in the 1980s, renting VHS tapes was an event. Do you remember that sinking feeling when you realized you had left the movie at home, still sitting in the VCR? The Trapper Keeper was not just a binder, it was a lifestyle. This glorious slab of plastic with vibrant covers, think unicorns, neon grids, or random geometric chaos, was the crown jewel of any school supply list in the 1980s. But what really made it iconic? That Velcro closure. The loud, slow rip of peeling open your binder was like a thunderclap in homeroom. One kid opened theirs? Fine. 20 kids did it at once? It sounded like the floor was being ripped up. Teachers hated it. Students loved it. The inside was perfectly organized with color-coded folders, pockets for notes, and room for a calculator or 3-scented pens. But the noise? That was the deal breaker. Eventually, some schools banned them altogether, citing disruption of learning, which is code for "this binder is louder than the morning announcements." But let us be honest, part of the appeal was the noise. It said, "I am prepared and I am here to cause mild chaos." The Trapper Keeper burned bright, and then it was gone. But if you were not cradling one of these masterpieces, you were probably outside spinning on something equally unnecessary and questionably effective. Let us talk about the portable dance revolution that was basically just fancy cardboard. Neon everything was not a trend, it was a takeover. Shirts, socks, shoelaces, scrunchies. If it could be worn, it could be neon. Bright pinks, electric greens, yellows so vivid they could stop traffic. Walk into a classroom in the 1980s, and you might see a dozen students glowing like highlighters. It was not subtle, it was not sophisticated, but it was unforgettable. Neon made sure you were seen from across the street, or the roller rink. Entire outfits were built around one blinding shade. And the braver kids, they mixed them. A neon blue shirt with neon orange shorts and lime green shoelaces. Why not? Matching was optional. Visibility was everything. Neon told the world you were loud, proud, and unbothered by what anyone else thought. It showed up in birthday parties, aerobics tapes, and mall photo booths. Looking back now, it seems like a color explosion. But that was the magic. Neon was confidence in color form. It was youth, amplified. It was chaos, celebrated. And for those who wore it without a hint of irony, it was the brightest part of a decade that refused to dim. Bugles arrived in 1966, And with them came a whole new shape of snacking. Shaped like tiny trumpets or cones, they were the snack you could eat or wear. Kids popped them onto their fingertips, wiggled their hands like claws, and then crunched them down one by one. But the novelty was not just in the shape. Bugles had a distinct texture, light, crispy, and a little flaky, that made them feel different from chips or pretzels. The corn-based flavor was salty, a little buttery, and oddly addictive. Unlike many snacks of the era, Bugles were not trying to copy something else. They were their own thing. Whether poured into a bowl for a party or packed into a lunchbox for recess, they brought a certain crunchy cheer to any setting. Parents liked that they were baked, not fried. Kids just liked that they were fun. Bugles became a staple of 1960s snack shelves alongside pretzel rods and Fritos, but they stood out for their playfulness. Even now, decades later, slipping a Bugle onto your finger sparks a flash of childhood. They were silly, satisfying, and one of the few snacks that doubled as a costume. Ah yes, the keytar, half keyboard, half guitar, and fully committed to stealing the spotlight. In the 1980s, nothing screamed, "I am serious about synth," like strapping a keyboard around your neck and rocking out like you were in a heavy metal band. And for a moment, it worked. Music videos featured them. Pop stars slung them over their shoulders like electric weapons of sound. The design was bold, the colors were wild, and the idea? Genius. It freed keyboardists from the shadows of the stage and let them strut front and center. But here's the thing. It still looked goofy. It was long, awkward, and required a very specific kind of confidence to pull off. If you did not have that swagger, you just looked like you were struggling with a giant, broken remote control. And once the synth-pop wave cooled down, so did the excitement. The keytar slid back into its weird niche corner of music history. But hey, at least it tried to make instruments cool. The same cannot be said for what came next. Because sometimes all it took to ruin your outfit was a pair of plastic sunglasses shaped like a lightning bolt. In the 1980s, hair was not just a style, it was architecture. Bangs soared into the air, shellacked in place with layers upon layers of aquanet. Bathrooms filled with the choking haze of aerosol as teens sprayed, teased, and sprayed again, determined to create skyscrapers out of strands. The bigger, the better. Girls competed over height, boys tried mullet variations, and mirrors fogged with the effort of construction. By the time they finished, their bangs were less hair and more sculpture, hard, sticky, and completely immovable in the face of wind, rain, or basic logic. Parents groaned at the cost of hairspray, while schools practically invented new fire codes around it. Still, nobody dared to touch the style. It was untouchable both literally and socially. To flatten your bangs was to surrender your 1980s credibility. Of course, the side effects were absurd. Hairbrushes gummed up, pillowcases stuck, and the ozone layer never forgave us. But for one brief, glorious era, hair was an act of rebellion and comedy rolled into one. Today, the photos inspire laughter and disbelief. But for those who lived it, hairsprayed bangs were a badge of honor. Do you remember ducking into the bathroom between classes to give your bangs one more defiant spray? Some inventions solve problems, others create them. The television with a built-in VHS player was supposed to be the ultimate convenience. One machine, one cord, one less reason to crawl behind the entertainment center. But this Frankenstein creation was as clunky as it was cursed. The built-in player jammed constantly. Tapes got eaten, ejected halfway through, or refused to rewind. And if the television broke, say goodbye to your movie nights. Repairs were complicated and expensive. If the VHS part failed, you were stuck with a giant screen that could not play anything. If the television part failed, you had a glorified tape storage box. The worst was when you were watching something and the tape chewed itself mid-scene, turning your favorite film into spaghetti. Still, it looked high-tech at the time, and for a short while, having one meant you were fancy. But like many 1980s trends, style outpaced practicality, and homes across America quietly swapped them out for separates once again. But if you wanted to keep the glow alive without the bulk, the next trend did it in the smallest, brightest way possible. Let us talk about glowing in the dark, on everything. Fashion layering experiments in the 1980s were less about logic and more about volume. You started with a base, maybe a turtleneck. Then you added a sweater, then a vest, maybe a blazer on top. Why? Because more was more. Scarves were optional, belts were mandatory. Jewelry? Yes, all of it. You wore 2 pairs of socks, scrunched perfectly over leggings tucked into boots. Hats inside? No problem. Fingerless gloves with bangles? Absolutely. It did not have to match. In fact, it was cooler if it did not. You looked like a walking closet explosion, and you owned it. The goal was not subtlety. The goal was layers. Warmth was a bonus, but style came first. Some outfits weighed more than a small dog. Some made it impossible to bend your arms. But in the mirror, you saw confidence. You saw edge. You saw someone ready to make an entrance even if it was just down the school hallway. Looking back, the combinations were questionable, but the spirit behind them? Pure creativity. Fashion in the 1980s did not whisper. It shouted, boldly, loudly, and with 7 visible layers. If any of these gifts stirred a memory you have carried quietly for years, share your story in the comments below. Tap like if this resonated and subscribe so you never miss the next journey into the holidays we actually lived.